This talk is called Evolution, Variation, Adaptation, Extinction, and it kind of is and isn't about those things. It's really just a couple of thoughts I've had recently that didn't really fit anywhere else, so I wanted to turn them into some metaphors for having a long and successful career on the web. The first metaphor is regarding one of my favorite things to study, which is evolution. And one of the first things I learned was about the Cambrian explosion, which happened about 540 million years ago, in which all of the major phyla that still exist on Earth today suddenly appeared in the fossil record. I say suddenly, it happened over about 20 million years. Nobody really knows the reason for the Cambrian explosion. There are probably a number of reasons, but one of them is doubtless an arms race between predator and prey, certainly exacerbated this sudden explosion. But one of the consequences we can be sure of is that the Cambrian explosion created a new series of niches for life to exploit. Nowadays on Earth there's all kinds of niches, including the dung beetle you can see here. And a great example is the lemur in Madagascar, which because of geographical isolation has actually evolved to fill most of the major roles filled by different mammals in different countries elsewhere in the world. The giraffe is an example of an animal which has filled a niche, but it's done so by evolving itself extraordinarily. This great long neck and powerful heart that's required to power the body. In fact, there's proof of how this has happened in the giraffe's laryngeal nerve, which in humans loops around a large artery near the heart and should only actually travel a distance of about an inch, but in a giraffe, because of this evolution of the long neck, has carried it over about 3 meters in length. This is known as extreme morphological adaptation, something which has become so adapted to its environment, to its niche, that it's actually become quite fragile, and a sudden change in that environment can cause it to end. Probably the greatest example of this are the giant dinosaurs, who died out pretty soon after the cataclysm because their great size left them unable to adapt to changes in their environment. Speaking of dinosaurs...
Hello and welcome once again to Top of the Pop.
So, moving on slightly, in 1976 was a terrible year for music, as you can see in the videos that I'm playing here. This is Disco Duck. Music was just not aimed for young people, not like nowadays, and young people just felt excluded by the stuff that was in the charts. It was kind of tacky and idiotic. And so this happened. Sex Pistols and punk in general were actually kind of misunderstood. The Sex Pistols, although they didn't release a lot, were hugely influential. At one show they did at Manchester's Free Trade Hall, there were only 40 people in the audience. But in those 40 were members of the bands that would go on to form the bands, Joy Division, The Fall, and The Smiths. Just incredibly influential, and one of the reasons for that was people tend to think that punk is about destruction and about ending things, but in fact it's about people taking something for themselves, something they didn't feel they had any control over, and just saying, you know what, we'll have this thing, this is ours, we want this, we'll make it. This is a famous chart from a punk fanzine, which shows, it says, this is a chord, this is another, this is a third, now form a band. That was the whole punk ethos, was not destroy things, but take it. Don't wait for other people to give you things. So, in case you haven't got them, I was kind of going for 3 key metaphors in this talk, and I'll spell them out for you a little bit. The first, which was around the Cambrian explosion, was I wanted to make this point, that diversity means opportunity. And the web we work on today is incredibly diverse compared to where it was 10 years ago. There are a number of big companies pulling for control, but in the meantime what this creates is opportunity for us developers. So we should avoid perhaps over-specializing. Stay with open web technologies, bet on open. Don't become like the giraffe's neck, and avoid, if you have a choice, don't go for iOS development or Flash development. And finally, be true to the spirit of punk. You have your 3 chords, that's HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Put them together to make your own band, make your own thing, and make things that you want to see in the world.